Okay, guys, let's see if I can do this. Reagan and foreign policy in 15 minutes. Start the timer. Here we go. So we discussed on the first side domestic policies, the neoconservatives, the moral majority, the heritage, the NRA, limiting the role of government, and also limiting taxes. We were supposed to decrease spending. That didn't always happen. Immigration, new immigration, Hispanics, Vietnamese, social programs are being cut while dropout rates are increasing. Crime is increasing. The war on drugs is being launched. You have a lot of different things going on. Reagan solidly wins 1984, in fact, by a landslide, even though despite you have your first female nominee, Geraldine Ferraro, for vice president. But the big thing that you have to know about Reagan, even though a lot of the domestic stuff is important, is his foreign policy. The number one thing he wants to do is restore America's supremacy. So the first thing I want to look at is it says right here, restore America's supremacy. Let's look at point blank the first three things I put in red. Pause them, get them down. Okay, first thing that we've got, increased military spending. $2 trillion in the first 3 years of his presidency. $2 trillion. That is a crap ton of money. Why does he want to increase military spending? We're in the middle of the Cold War. And we'll talk about specifically one of the sayings he has and why he spends so much. Confronting challenges in the Middle East and Latin America. I want you to circle Middle East and Latin America. A lot of the situations that Reagan is going to face are going to be in these two areas, which you don't always think, oh, wow, Middle East and Latin America, that's the Cold War. It's actually very interesting how foreign policy kind of is a little bit different in Reagan's time period. And he will be credited with ending the Cold War with the Soviet Union, especially because they're going to have a new leader, Mr. Mikhail Gorbachev, who Reagan actually got along very well with. The one thing that I really want to get, and this is the very next thing I have written here, is a saying that Reagan actually put. If you look at your paper right here, it's actually got a star by it, peace through strength. Here is the quote right here. We maintain the peace through our strength. Weakness only invites aggression. Read it again. We maintain peace through our strength. Weakness only invites aggression. You want to know what that really means? Because I've just got it in there. Peace through strength. Literally, it will be peaceful if we look extremely strong. If we look weak, somebody will take and try and take us out. So with that, Reagan says, we need to look strong. Well, guess what it takes to look strong in the military? Money, guns, ships, airplanes. That is why Reaganomics, while it was a nice idea, he didn't cut the military spending. In fact, he increased the military spending. So it's going to be a little bit problematic there. However, it will be worth it if we can end the Cold War. And actually, he did. So some people debate on if that was good or bad. Now, the next thing I have for you to write is SDI. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. SDI is better known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, but I'm going to be real honest with you. This is why I played that song, Challenging the Evil Empire is what he will say. He's going to launch what we will call the Star Wars program. Now, Reagan viewed the USSR as the focus of evil in the modern world. In fact, that is exactly his quote, focus of evil in the modern world. It's a threat to U.S. security. He says, we have to be hardlined. Peace through what? Strength. The first thing he does, oh my God, you want to put peace through strength? Perfect example. Just put this up there. Sent 572 nukes within range of Moscow. Bam! Marka. The next thing he did is he began the Strategic Defense Initiative. This is SDI, so you can write it out beside there. An anti-missile laser system in space to defend the United States. That sounds like it's out of Star Wars. In fact, some of literally the news magazines will call it the Star Wars program. And with that, SDI becomes a little bit of a joke, but in all honesty, it's something that Reagan thought up of, and he was like, if we can make them think, and we could maybe even develop it, the commies can't touch us if they think we can knock down their nuke from outer space with just a push of a button. This is what it was supposed to look like. Looks kind of crazy though, right? That's why people sometimes called it Star Wars. In fact, here is the cover of Time magazine. Time, defending defense, budget battles, and Star Wars. And this is exactly what was portrayed to the American public in the 1980s. So SDI, Star Wars, very high tech. Now, you want to know, before I move on too much, You want to know what's really interesting about this is a lot of people thought SDI was a joke. That's scary. Maybe that's why they were a little bit more approachable at the end of the Cold War. The other thing is no matter what you do, if you invest in technology, will it help out later? Of course it will. You know, going to the moon is one of the reasons why we have cell phones nowadays. That technology is invaluable. So something to think about with SDI. Even though it was expensive, maybe it helped out later. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to kind of talk about a couple little trouble spots. I said he had a lot of trouble spots in the Middle East and in Latin America. Let's start. I do believe we're going to start with the Middle East. So the first thing I want to look at, here's a picture of the Middle East. Let's go ahead and load up and look at the fact that Reagan is concerned that the Palestinian Liberation Organization would threaten the Camp David Accords. This is the area that the Camp David Accords was looking to stabilize. Remember, Israel and Egypt is who the Camp David Accords with Carter was under. So with that, Reagan is getting concerned that there's a lot of situations, especially with the Palestinians, threatening that peace. So what he does, and here's your first thing, Marines in Lebanon, says in 1982, Reagan sent Marines to help evacuate Lebanon during Israeli missile attacks on Palestinian Liberation Organization bases. Now, what he is doing here is he's trying to put American troops on the ground, maybe hopefully to maintain peace, but also maybe to make them a little bit nervous. Well, the problem is those Marines, okay, were actually seen as the enemy. Here's the next thing you need to write under Marines in Lebanon. Marines were seen as the enemy, and 239 were killed when attacked by a suicide bombing. Now, pause this, get it down if you need to. The thing that you're talking about here is in 1982, Reagan is putting us into the Middle East to help out evacuating Lebanon. And the Camp David Accords is starting to become threatened. This is looking very, very scary. And then you find out that 239 American Marines were killed in the Middle East, not fighting for American freedom. This is going to very much hurt President Reagan's foreign policy. It's called the Marines in Lebanon situation. Reagan gave the order to withdraw from Lebanon in 1984. We were only there 2 years. I think he was trying to help, but it did not work out well for him, especially in a public stance. Now, the next thing we need to look is we've got Iran and Hezbollah. So the first thing I need you to write down there, pause this, get it down. In 1983, a terrorist group called Hezbollah captured 6 American hostages. Wait. This is familiar to me. In Iran, there are American hostages. We've heard this story before. But this is 1983. It's not Carter. It's Reagan. So what Reagan does... Whoa, we just went to Latin America. Did you see that? Middle East, Latin America. That was a big jump there. And we still have hostages in Iran. So what actually happens in Iran when those hostages are taken? Okay, is that we have to do some back dealing in other areas of the world to get Iran to release our hostages, because Reagan knows that can totally 100% screw him up. And that's in 1983. His re-election's in 1984. So what he does is he looks to Latin America. And I say he looks, they look to Latin America. Now, the first thing we're going to look at here is communism in Latin America. He attempts to resist it, okay? I still want you to keep those hostages in the back of your mind in Iran, okay? We don't want to forget about them. He attempts to resist communism in Latin America, though. The first thing we do, and you might want to just kind of, and it says communism in Latin America, you're just going to want to put Nicaragua's Sandinista rebels, led a coup against the U.S.-backed regime, leads a coup d'etat against a U.S.-backed regime. So now Nicaragua has turned what color? Red. Ooh, wait a second. Those dominoes, they are a-coming. Containment. The next thing, in 1983, Reagan had actually asked, can I go basically into Nicaragua to help overthrow the Sandistas? The Contras is what they're going to be called, the government. They're communist Contras. And Congress says, what does it say? No. So with that, communism in Latin America, Nicaragua is now solidly communist. Now, the last thing that you need to really look at here is there is a little situation, and I don't even know, yeah, you might want to stick this out to the side, communism in Latin America. U.S. Marines invaded Grenada in 1983 to keep radical regime from turning over an airfield to Cuba or the USSR. So actually, we go into Grenada as well. But here's what ends up happening, the Iran-Contra affair. 1987. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let you pause this and get it down because it's a little bit of a difficult concept. So pause it, put the dates, put everything I have in red, and you'll be good to go in just a second. Pause it. All right, 1987, Iran-Contra affair. Now this is interesting because Iran is in the Middle East, the Contras are in Nicaragua. How does this happen? So to free those 6 U.S. hostages in Iran, the NSC, National Security Council, the CIA, okay, covert, secret, sold missiles to the Iranian government, the Khomeini's government, okay? Now, the profit from these missile sales were used to aid the Nicaraguan Contras, and by selling missiles to Iran, who's a little bit scary, are we agreeing on this? To literally get those hostages back, we gave missiles. It's a little bit scary. And profits from those missile sales were used to aid some of a little bit of a situation down in Latin America. Now, here's the deal. Reagan says, I didn't know anything about it. I promise. I had no clue. I had no idea any of this was going on. And for any other president, they wouldn't have believed it. But Reagan was so lovable. He had plausible deniability. They actually end up calling him, I love this. You might want to put this out beside this. The Teflon president. You know what Teflon is? That's that stuff they put on a pan so that you don't stick to it. This is a kind of an NSC. This is the guy that actually, he kind of, I'm going to be honest with you, kind of blamed it on. And Reagan, there he is smiling, didn't do it, doesn't have to worry about anything, okay? But by far, last couple minutes of these notes, let's go ahead and get down what is Reagan's most important foreign policy triumph. Working with the new USSR leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, to end the Cold War. Why don't you pause this and get it down, please? Okay, so with that, in 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev began a new era in the Soviet Union. And these are totally Russian words. You can say them with me if you would like to. Petrovskaya and Glasnost. And with this, it's almost like détente again, but Gorbachev is initiating it in his own country. Now, Reagan and Gorbachev actually meet multiple different times, and Reagan gets a chance to talk to Gorbachev about this Petrovskaya and Glasnost stance that he has. But here's what it is. You want to know what they technically translate to in American? Political openness, freedom of press, assembly, travel, religion, the first working legislator, the first competitive elections, and literally they released political prisoner, introducing moderate capitalism into the Soviet. That's like sounding like America. Have you noticed the progression between Stalin and now Gorbachev? You had Stalin. Then you had, Khrushchev. Then Brezhnev. And each step towards Gorbachev is a little bit more open to the rest of the world. Gorbachev and Reagan can work together. They literally meet multiple different times. And these pictures, look at these pictures. These are in the middle of Red Square. Okay, so with that, St. Petersburg, they go to Moscow. Here's Reagan. They're holding a baby. Oh my God, they like each other. It's a miracle. The Cold War is over. It is not cold anymore. It is literally not a war. And there they are, sitting by the fire, laughing, getting along, America and the USSR. Now, in 1987, and I want to make sure you get this down, ending the Cold War, INF happens. Reagan and Gorbachev signed INF treaty eliminating ICBMs in Europe, period. American ICBMs, Soviet ICBMs, no ICBMs, which means missiles. So it's like SALT, but it's like the mother of all salts. It's INF. And it actually stands for Intermediate Nuclear Forces, okay? Now, he also goes, I don't know if you know this, but real quickly, I don't have the video, we'll watch it in class. He actually, Reagan goes to Berlin and makes the very famous speech, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And we'll watch that in class, okay? The end of the Cold War actually doesn't happen until 1991. However, Reagan is the one that gets credit for it. 1989, Gorbachev promotion of democratization, in Eastern Europe inspired the overthrow of 40 years of a communist rule. In 1990, the following of Eastern Europe happens. You'll notice right here, bam, Soviet Union dissolved, December 7th, 1991, Russia and 10 former Soviet republics become the Commonwealth and independent states. You now have a non-communist Europe. So that is going to be pretty dang important. Former countries of the USSR by 2000. Now, he was so loved, his vice president would easily take over. So we'll get to that one next time.